Morning. Thank you, Joe. As I said, I'm Hannah Foxwell. I am product manager at Server Density. I'm very involved in the DevOps community in London, and I also run a meetup called Human Ops, where we focus on the human aspects of running infrastructure. So I'm very interested in the human impacts of the technology we use, and that is what this talk is about today. But first, let me share my recent success with you. Success is mine. I have no unread messages in my inbox. I know, what an amazing achievement. I have read everything that I have received today. Of course, that's not really what the definition of success is, but we quite often celebrate these small moments of triumph during our working day, as though that's what is important. You're never going to read a job spec that says, must be willing to spend 50% of your working day reading and responding to electronic messages. You're never going to start a new job, and during your company introduction, someone says, here's your inbox. We're going to expect you to check that 11 times an hour. But that's what we do. And it's becoming a bit of a problem in our workplaces. It's not just email that is the problem. We've got so much technology that's vying for our attention now. We've got iMessages, we've got multiple forms of messages, we've got WhatsApp, we've got Facebook, we're all using Slack. We're probably members of a vast range of Slack teams, and within those teams there's about 100 or more channels to keep in touch with. And is it any wonder that we feel interrupted and disrupted all day, every day? And it's our brains that are being digitally disruptive, and unfortunately no one is safe from this kind of digital disruption. It's a mouthful. One study showed that the average person will check their phone 110 times a day. I think probably in this community we're a little bit above average on that front. The average person is interrupted 11 times, 11 times an hour by a digital notification of some kind. As employees in the workplace at the moment, we generally experience only 3 minutes of uninterrupted focus at any one time. And when we are interrupted, it takes an average of 23 minutes for us to regain focus and go back to the task at hand. So is it any wonder we're frustrated? How are we getting anything done in this environment? So today I'm going to talk about information overload, interruptions, and what we can do both as individuals and within our teams in our organizations to help ourselves and to help each other get better at this. Because guess what? Developers really hate interruptions. The type of work we do, the complex technical problem solving that is our day job, does not sit well with all of these interruptions. Once you've oriented yourself to a problem, have you ever had one of those moments where you sort of get that sort of glimmer of an idea of how you might solve a problem, only to have your phone buzz or an email arrive or something bulldoze your attention, and that flicker of an idea is lost? And then when you go back to the task at hand, it takes you a really frustrating 5, 10, 20 minutes to reorient yourself to the problem and get back to where you were to figure out actually what was the thing I was going to do next. Developers really hate interruptions, but it's not just developers. It's anyone involved in complex technical problem solving. It's operations as well. It's all of us. I think Joel Spolsky from Stack Overflow puts it really well when he says developers need to concentrate. The more things you can keep in your head at once, the faster you can code by orders of magnitude. Is it any wonder so many developers choose to work in the middle of the night, where all of these notifications and disruptions quieten down a little bit? And one study that focused specifically on programmers found that as a programmer, you're likely to get just one uninterrupted 2-hour session in your working day. And I don't know about you, but I think that would be pretty good going. I've worked in places where I believe it was a hell of a lot lower than that. But if that's what you're doing, if you're only productive, if you're only doing your day job for 2 hours a day, then that task that you estimated to be 10 hours worth of work is going to take a week instead of a day and a half. And if we look at improving this by a factor of 50%, you can already see that we're going to be making a huge difference in our working lives and in the working lives of our teams. Now, is it any wonder that we have so many conversations about how we estimate? And this is one of the reasons that we get it so wrong so often. And I know what some of you are probably thinking. You're probably thinking that actually this doesn't apply to me because I am always on and I'm always chatting and I'm always doing everything at once and I'm multitasking and it feels fantastic. But I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. The cognitive losses from multitasking are greater than the cognitive losses from smoking weed. You might as well be sat at your desk smoking a joint if you think that you're writing code and messaging on Slack and responding to your email all at once. This is fiction. And the reason that multitasking feels so good is that your brain is a dopamine addict. So your brain is going to be rewarding you for all of this busy work. The cruel trick that your mind plays on you is that actually where you're multitasking and achieving a lot less to a lot lower quality than you would be if you were focused on a single task, is that your brain is going to have you believe that you're not. It's going to have you believe that you're being so productive. All of this busy work is going to feel fantastic. You're going to be rewarded with the pleasure hormone dopamine in your brain. And to break out of that loop is incredibly hard. Your brain's an addict, and we need to manage that. Not only that, but multitasking actually increases the production of stress hormones. So you're going to have adrenaline and cortisol pumping through your veins, and this can actually lead to sort of clouded thinking and a blurry mind. You're not going to have the clarity of thought that you're going to have if you're feeling calm and focused on a single thing. This doesn't feel like a great state of mind to be in to do the work that we do. And if that isn't bad enough, self-interruption is a thing. Thanks again, brain. So interruption and distraction are like a bad habit. The more you do it, the more your brain is going to be used to doing it, and the more your brain will do it to yourself. So it doesn't matter whether or not your phone really did buzz. It doesn't matter whether or not you did get an email. You're going to be constantly going back and checking that because it's a habit. It's a behavior that you've now ingrained within your brain. I certainly do this, and it frustrates me wildly. So I sit down, and I know exactly what I need to be doing. And then a few minutes later, I'll find myself looking at my inbox. And I'm like, why am I looking at my inbox right now? There are no new messages here. I know exactly what's in my inbox. And actually, it doesn't matter right now. This is one of those subconscious things that the more we do it, the more likely we are to do it to ourselves. The other interesting thing about the relationship between interruptions and self-interruption is that the more external interruptions that you experience, the more you are likely to suffer from self-interruption. So it was found that the more interruptions that a person is exposed to within an hour, the more likely they are to self-interrupt during the following hour of work. So the more fire and forget messages, the more fire and forget emails you receive, the more spam you receive, the more likely you are to be less productive and to interrupt yourself in the next hour. And of course, it works the other way around. So if someone sends you a message and you immediately reply, you're then disrupting them. The more we fire off this communication to each other, the more we disrupt each other, the less all of us are going to get done. But this is not a talk about productivity. It is frustrating that we're not getting much done, but a lot of this goes a bit deeper, and it can actually start to impact your health and your well-being. One of the most fascinating things that I've read about recently is email apnea. Email apnea is real, or email or application apnea, because it's not just email that's the problem anymore. So by definition, email apnea is the shallow breathing or breath holding while doing email or working or playing in front of a screen. And it probably doesn't sound very familiar to anyone, but guess what? 80% of us do this. So the technology that we use in day out is affecting us physiologically. We're holding our breath or we're breathing differently while we're doing this type of work. When we change the way we breathe, it impacts our stress levels, which in turn impacts our emotional well-being. And guess what? You're not going to be able to work effectively either. It's lose-lose. And we're not even unplugging at night. I know that remote working and flexible working are becoming huge trends in our industry. We're working with people across many different time zones. And that leads us to this situation where we feel we need to be always available and always on. And it's affecting our sleep. Using devices at night affects our sleep. 1/3 of UK adults will check their mobile phone during the night, which I think is a staggering statistic. This is after you've gone to bed and before you wake up in the morning. I can't think of any reason except a real emergency where you might need to check your phone, but 1/3 of us are doing it. And hey, I'll put my hand up. I do this too. 10% check our mobiles as soon as we wake up in the morning. 52% of us check our phone within 15 minutes of waking up. And not only that, but reading from a light-emitting device immediately before we go to bed impacts the production of melatonin, our sleep hormone. So the more you're plugged in before bed, the less sleep and the worse quality of sleep you're going to be having during the night, and the less you're going to be able to concentrate and focus the following day. It should go without saying that we need sleep. As humans, we need sleep. Lack of sleep is linked to obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and a number of other health conditions. If we're not getting at least 7 hours of sleep every night, we are impacting our health. And we can affect our emotional well-being by behaving like this as well. And it can go a little bit deeper than just having a look at your friend's amazing Instagram or Facebook photos of their holiday and feeling that little twinge of jealousy. A lot of it can impact our emotional well-being and our sense of self-worth. So I'm going to talk about a few of those aspects as well. So who knows what FOMO is? Do you want to tell me? Yes. So fear of missing out is something that we all experience now. We're living in this sort of hyper-connected world. When we're not plugged in, when we're not online, things could be happening. Things could be happening that we're not aware of. We could be missing out on something. I mean, what would happen right now if we switched the internet off in this building? Who would be comfortable with that situation? One guy is comfortable with that situation. But yeah, it could lead to feelings of anxiety, especially the loss of that connectivity. If you're used to being hyper-connected and always on, there's a bit of a fear that sort of sets in when you're not connected. And usually it's completely false. There's no reason for you to feel like you always need to be online. It's just something that we believe ourselves. It can obviously affect your stress levels. And it can also enhance something called Impostor Syndrome. The thing about the internet is, the greatest thing about the internet is that there's so much information available at your fingertips. One of the worst things about the internet is that there's so much information available at your fingertips. Being online will constantly present to you people who are smarter, better, cleverer than you. It will constantly present to you things you don't know enough about. And that can lead to feeling inferior, like you're not doing well enough, like you're not good enough, which is what we know as imposter syndrome. And when we allow our devices and our technology to dictate what we pay attention to dictate our focus, when we allow our apps to tell us what the next important thing is instead of actually taking a step back and thinking about what we should be doing next, we can get a sense of that we're not really in control of ourselves and of our working day, and that can contribute to burnout. One of the major factors in employee burnout is not necessarily the amount of work that you need to get done. It's about feeling like you're not in control of the work that you need to get done. And we all know that that has a terrible impact on the people it affects. So, the FOMO is about to get real. I'm going to set you a challenge. We're going to share 15 minutes of disconnectedness together. I'm going to challenge you not to look at your phone, not to even touch your phone or your laptop, just for the next 15 minutes while I finish this talk. There's nothing going to happen. I promise you. It could be a bit scary, it could be a bit uncomfortable, but I promise you, the world isn't going to end because you don't touch your phone for 15 minutes. So that's what I'd like you to do. That's your challenge. And while I've got your full attention, I'm going to move on to talk about brains. So we're going to cover a little bit of neuroscience about why all of this happens to us. If the human brain was so simple that we could understand it, we would be so simple that we couldn't. I put this in here as a caveat. So I am not a neuropsychologist. I'm just quite interested in this stuff. So we're going to keep this really high level. But I think the more that you understand what's going on with you and what's going on with your colleagues, the more able we are to make positive changes. So I'm going to start by talking about the attentional system in the brain. There's essentially 4 key components to the attentional system: the attentional filter, the central executive mode, mind-wandering mode, and the attentional switch. The attentional filter does exactly what you would expect it to. It's a little bit of the brain called the insula, and it takes input from all of your senses and decides what's important. We're probably not sat in this room thinking about the temperature. We're probably not sat in this room thinking about the color of the chairs. But if either of those changed dramatically, it would be brought to the attention of our conscious mind, and we'd be like, hell, what just happened? The chairs have turned red. Or, whatever. This is the attentional filter in action. If the temperature in this room suddenly shot up to 40 degrees, all of a sudden, that information is important. The attentional filter kicks in, and it brings that piece of information to your conscious mind. So you can imagine what the attentional filter is doing when your phone starts buzzing in your pocket, as an example. Next, we have the central executive mode. So this is the supervisory system that allows you to direct your attention. When we sit down and to do our work, when we're solving a problem, or even if the problem we're solving is that we're responding to an email, we're engaging the central executive. It's self-directed thoughts and actions. And obviously, this is the mode that we would most like to be in and most like to maintain when we're doing our work. On the flip side, we have mind-wandering mode. So this is about paying attention to your internal thoughts, and both are important. Mind-wandering mode has been shown to improve your creativity and empathy. It's about balance. You can't engage the central executive all the time. You need to give yourself an opportunity to mind-wander. The most common example to relate to mind-wandering is if you're driving and you're allowing your thoughts to sort of veer off in another direction, and all of a sudden you realize that you've missed your exit. That's mind-wandering mode. And it is important that we allow ourselves time to do that. And finally, we have the attentional switch. The attentional switch switches your attention. Really simple. But the interesting thing about the attentional switch is it gets really tired. So the more you switch your attention, the more you multitask, the more you flip between different activities, the more you kind of wear out this attentional switch. And it can cause actually really muddled thinking and no clarity of thought when your attentional switch gets a bit worn out. You feel like you need a break, you feel exhausted. It's definitely something I can relate to. I don't know about you. So the attentional system. The attentional filter, the central executive, mind-wandering, and the attentional switch all work together to allow you to focus, or the opposite, to not focus. You can imagine how the technology that we use in our day-to-day lives is affecting this system, causing us to task switch constantly, causing us to have a less than optimal state of mind for the work that we're actually engaged in. Our brains also suffer from a novelty bias. So, much like your presenter today, your brain likes shiny new things. We're curious creatures, and you can see how, from an evolutionary perspective, that was important. If something is new in your environment, if something changes in your environment, then you're going to want to go and have a look at this. Is this friend or foe? Do I need to worry about this? Unfortunately, the novelty bias is working against us, because if you know you've got an unread message on your phone, that curiosity kicks in, and it's going to play on your mind until you actually understand what that message is. And it might not be important. It might be spam, for all you know. But until you've actually satisfied yourself that you'll know what it's about, your novelty bias is going to be niggling away at you in the back of your mind. And that can actually impact your cognitive abilities and your IQ from the point at which you know there's a message to the point at which you read it. I'm just going to leave this here for a second for everyone to digest. Having received a new email, there is a 40% chance that you'll open it within 3 seconds. 3 seconds. We need more self-control. Nobody sending an email expects you to read it within 3 seconds of it arriving. I honestly don't believe that. If they needed your attention, they'd phone you. We also have something called the completion bias. So it's the little dopamine addict in your head again that's going to reward you for a task completed. The problem with the completion bias is it rewards you regardless of the importance of the task. This is the part of the brain that's going to make you want to reply to all of that email, because it's easy to do, and because it's small tasks, you're going to get that little kick of satisfaction when it's a job done. Even if it isn't the most important thing to do. It takes willpower to resist that urge, to resist the urge to get through all of the small, insignificant tasks every morning when you go into work, instead of focusing on what's most important. Yep, your brain's a little addict, and we need to manage him, her, it. The other thing about your brain is that your ability to focus is finite. So the brain has fuel like any other part of the body. It runs on oxygenated glucose in your blood. The brain, although it makes up about 2% of your body mass, will burn through 20 to 30% of the calories that you consume. And when you run out of that oxygenated glucose, you're not going to be as able to focus. So there's loads of things that we can do to get better at this and to help ourselves and each other. I'll focus on what we can do as individuals first. There's this thing called configuration that you might be familiar with. But yeah, guess what? Most of our apps come with some of that configuration. You can manage your notifications to avoid unnecessary interruptions during your day. If you do have a lot of work to do and you have a lot of tasks playing on your mind, just do a brain dump. Write down everything that you're going to do later. That will free up your mind to focus on whatever the task at hand is without that niggling feeling that you're not getting everything done as quickly as possible. Sort out your tasks. Plan to complete similar tasks at the same time. Instead of responding to email as and when it arrives, doing it on somebody else's schedule, do it on your own schedule. Say, actually, you know what? I probably will deal with my email 3 times a day. I'm going to do it at these times. Sort similar tasks into batches together and get them all done at once. That will help you switch between different mind sort of modes. If you don't need to necessarily engage the central executive mode, if you don't need that very, very focused concentration, do all of that work at once. That'll give you a break, and you'll be more able to concentrate when you go back to the more demanding tasks on your list. Don't multitask. I think I've said this before. But I'll say it again, don't multitask. Your brain is lying to you, you're not good at it. And it's important to have a routine that works for you. So everyone is different. Everyone has peaks and troughs during their working day. I know, from my perspective, I'm not very good after lunch. I have a bit of a mid-afternoon slump. So between about 2 and 4 o'clock, I do all of my admin, the stuff that doesn't need my focused attention. And I save my mornings for the more creative work that I need to engage with. That's what works for me. Pay attention to what works for you and try and plan your day around it. It's actually easier than it sounds. And finally, decide what not to do. There is always, always more work than you have time for. And it's really important to decide what you're not going to pick up. If you don't make that conscious decision about what you're not going to do, that's going to play on your mind and it's going to impact your ability to concentrate on the things that are really important. So I'm a big fan of nap-driven development. I think this is very important. But did you know that a well-timed 15-minute nap during your working day can increase your IQ by 10 points? Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that? So yeah, recharging your brain is also important, and there's a number of ways that you can do that during your working day. If you work from home, have a nap. If you have a sleeping pod in your office, have a nap, maybe. But don't be ashamed to have a nap if you need one. Take regular breaks. You can't be always on, always concentrated, always 100%. Make sure you take a break. You can only concentrate for something like, I think it's 90 minutes to 2 hours at sort of the height of your ability. And from that point on, you begin to deteriorate. So take a break, refuel your mind, and you'll be all the better for it when you return to the task. Don't skip meals. That oxygenated glucose that your brain is burning through comes from somewhere, and it comes from your food and drink. So if you're not eating properly, or you're eating in some kind of weird routine, or skipping breakfast, or skipping lunch because you're too busy for them, say, you're actually not doing yourself any favors. You're literally depleting the nutrients that your brain needs to do the task at hand. Weird one, chewing gum actually increases the blood flow to your brain. So if you had a meal, why not chew gum? It's going to improve your ability to concentrate and the production of long-term memories, apparently. Allow yourself to daydream. We cannot engage the central executive mode all of the time. Give yourself those breaks and allow yourself to daydream. Both modes of thought are important, and it's good to have a balance. And finally, outside of work, it's really good to have a hobby. So one of the things that I find recharges me is drawing. Any kind of hobby that engages your full attention for any length of time, that doesn't require you to be thinking too heavily or challenged. Like if you play sport, for example, if you get good enough at it that it becomes like an automatic thing, it can be amazing at sort of recharging your mind because you're engaging a different way of thinking. And meditation. Does anyone here meditate? Yeah, a few hands, that's good, that's good. It's quite trendy at the moment to talk about this, but it's been proved to change the shape and form of your brain. It improves the thickness of those really important attentional systems that we were talking about earlier. When you practice focusing your attention, you become more aware of where your attention is at any time. You're much more in the moment, and you're much more able to make conscious decisions about where you want to direct that attention. So yeah, like I said, it improves your focus when you're not meditating as well. It's about practicing that skill. There are some great apps available. I've been using Headspace. There's also some really great meditation podcasts as well. So if you haven't tried it, give it a go. It will literally change your brain. So that was all about what we can do as individuals to help ourselves, but what can we do to help each other? I think one of the main things we can do is just talk about it. If you've got a problem, that's created by the people around you in your team, if they're sending too many short fire and forget emails, if they're overwhelming you with messages on Slack, if you've got a feeling that they are expecting a response immediately, then talk about it. We talk about the tools that we use to automate our delivery pipelines all the time. Why don't we talk about the tools we use to communicate with each other? Why don't we talk about how we use those better? We don't do that enough. Some offices introduce interruption-free hours, and I think that's a really positive thing. So these are the hours during which actually we're all going to work on our own, and then when that's over, we can send any messages or questions to each other. I think that that's a really positive thing you can do, especially when you're working with developers. Flexible working is great. It allows people to adapt their schedule to what suits them, so they're working at the time of day that they're best, not the time of the day that your company expects you to clock in and clock out. The more that we understand the nature of the work, the more we understand that actually manning a desk from 9 to 5 is not the best way to get the most out of your people. So flexible working I would recommend as well. Think again about open plan offices. These are horrendous for developers and operations people alike, full of distractions and interruptions that have nothing to do with technology at all. Where have all the walls gone? Bring back walls. And we can encourage people, and we can do it ourselves. We could be a bit more intentional about our communication. So what messages are appropriate for Slack? What messages are appropriate for email? What kind of communication is appropriate to actually pick up the phone and have a chat with someone? Be a bit more intentional and try not to slip into the habit of always using one mode of communication for every type of message, because then the recipient will never know whether or not it's an email that they can read later or an email that they have to respond to immediately. If we set ourselves standards around this, then we set better expectations with the recipient about whether or not they do need to respond immediately, and I think that's really important. So the question that nobody was asking is actually, what does this have to do with DevOps, Hannah? So I was a DevOps consultant for 2 years, and I went into a lot of organizations, and a lot of the problems that surfaced to me during that time weren't about their ability to ship code into production. It was actually about how they communicated with each other as people. And when we talk about DevOps, we often talk about collaboration. We talk about communication in a way that sounds like we're not doing enough of it. And my experience in the real world, that actually we're doing too much of it in the wrong way. So I'm here to propose that in order to make these transformational changes that we're all going through, we need to be a lot more mindful and respectful and intentional about how we communicate with each other in our organizations. As I said at the beginning, I run a community called HumanOps where we talk about the very human impacts of working in technology right now. We believe that as humans, we are not highly available. You cannot treat humans like your infrastructure. The health and well-being of your human operators and developers impacts the reliability of the systems they build and support. And the human health of your team will impact the health of your business. If anyone would like to talk to me about HumanOps afterwards, I'm going to be around all day. And we have a thriving community in London if you'd like to get involved in that. I'll end by saying this. I think that the amount of change that we're going through at the moment in our industry is phenomenal. But I've also seen huge amounts of great communities collaborating with each other to get better at this, and I think that's a hugely positive thing. This is just one dimension that I'd like to bring to the forefront, and if you want to have these conversations in your team, I think that would be really beneficial. Thank you very much for having me as a last-minute speaker. It's been an absolute privilege, and yeah, I'll see you soon.